Hey guys, how's that bite? I'm Miguel Malenciano and this is Evolution Angler Bassin. Don't go anywhere because today we're going to talk about floating worm. So what is the floating worm? Floating worm is going to be a finesse presentation and we'll use it to draw bass out of cover and from the depths up to you. This can be an exciting way to fish and a deadly, super effective way to fish as well. Number one, visually you get to see the bite. Even if it's subsurface, you're still gonna have that bite visible to you for a couple reasons. Because typically you're gonna be fishing a bright color worm. And two, again, because it's right at the surface or right below the surface. I'll begin to fish a floating worm when the water temperatures reach from the low 50s to about the mid 50s. Other signs are when the leaves actually start coming out on the trees. Another sign really is when you could first start to see beds here and there. Even if they're small isolated beds, one or two is usually enough of an indication to let you know that you can start tossing a floating worm. This lure, this presentation really shines in the spring. I'll typically fish this presentation from, again, that 55-degree temperature mark, sounds about right, all the way through the fall. It's really the winter where you may not get a bite unless you're in a deep winter haunt. Now, why is this super deadly, super effective? For a couple reasons, right? Number one, the drawing power. We've all seen the drawing power that huge, big old swim baits have. And this is going to be right in the realm of that. I'll fish this presentation with a good set of glasses, typically amber or copper, because you'll get followers on this. This presentation makes the fish very curious. Also, the action that it has, flicking, shimmying, shaking. A lot of the times you can cause a lot of commotion and not end up covering a lot of water unless you really want to. Basically like the same thing as a popper, except instead of making noise, what you're doing here is just causing a lot of visual ruckus. Now there's a wide range of setups that you could use in terms of gear to fish this presentation. I'm gonna start out with the more basic and the more practical ones. Usually the more experience you have, the more wide that door is for you to play around, tinker, and see what works for you. Alright, so that's when to fish it. Let's talk about how to fish it. So typically you're going to want to fish a floating worm on a medium action spinning rod. That is the most prototypical setup you could have for this presentation. And what's very key in rigging this is you're going to want to have a kink. Usually you're going to want to fish this presentation real shallow, talking from inches to 3, 4, 5 feet of water. You can, however, fish it in deeper, and you're going to use it as a search bait. We're going to circle back to that. In talking about fishing tight to cover, prototypically you're going to want to look for like sparse pads or a lay down and toss it in there and get to flicking. You give it a flick, a 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Again, it all depends on your skill level. If your skill level is that you could just make it dance, shimmy, and shake and just pretty much keep it in the same area, then the more power to you. As the water goes from freezing cold to moderate to hot, I will go from slow to fast. Bite, to me anyway, dies down a little bit in the summertime, but that could be because of pressure. The fish have seen everything under the sun by then. So I'll typically fish it faster, and I'll typically fish it in different variations. So I may play around with the colors at that point. And again, for some reason, the bite just picks up again around the fall. Don't know what it is, maybe because the fish are keying in on smaller bait fish. But usually that's how it goes for myself in these parts. In using it as a search bait, you can fish it deep. I would fish it deep more as a subsurface bait, and I would peg it. I'd peg it with a peg, obviously, then 1 or 2 beads to a split shot. And that's pretty much what it looks like there. The reason why I do that, and I leave about 3-4 inches between the peg and the split shot, is because that's going to produce noise. as you're shimmying and shaking pretty fast, mind you, because you're using it as a search bait. And it's just that much more added drawing power to what you already have. It's definitely an added feature to the lure. So again, yes, you can use it as a search bait. Alright, so let's talk about the gear. The rods, the reels, the lines, the terminal tackle. If you're sort of new to this and you're just getting started with floating worms, then I'm going to suggest that you start out with medium spinning combo, 8 to 12 pound line, and a 6-inch finesse worm. And I'll show you what I mean. So here I got my medium spinning G Loomis E6X, and what I have it on, 500 size reel, and I have it on braid to fluoro. I have it on 12 pound Seaguar Smackdown braid, high visibility. That's very key because again, you're sight fishing almost. You're using your eyes to rely on when to go ahead and pull the trigger. Then I have that going to 8 pound test Seaguar Invisex fluorocarbon, and I have that on a VMC 2-aught EWG fast grip hook. And what I have here is a bright color, bright orange, like a day glow orange. So that's another key important part of the deal. You're typically going to want to fish bright colors. Like I said, I would start out with like a 6-inch worm. Some of the brands, so Zoom obviously with their trick worm. So Zoom makes a good worm, their finesse worms. Cream makes another great worm. This is the 6-inch Scoundrel by Cream. This is an amazing worm. This specific color is chameleon blue. I like it. It does have little highlights of the rose pink color. It is ribbed, pretty much, you know, what you're looking for, just without the bright colors. And you'll have your natural colors for their situations and places. And again, I'll leave a link in the description below with some of my favorite lures, terminal tackle. So I primarily like to make my own lures in terms of finesse worms. I feel like it's a little bit more customizable. Not that the colors that are out there aren't good, they are, but in terms of separation from the rest of the field, I feel again, you know, you can just fine tune it to your bodies of water a little bit better, and that's primarily what I do. So I like to break floating worm colors down into two categories: your solid colors and your translucent colors. And then you'll have your brights and your naturals thrown in the mix just on both sides of the fence. We'll start out with translucence. Again, because I make my own lures, I like to customize things and tweak them just a little bit more than average. So probably the most popular color that you can have for floating worm fishing is going to be merthiolate, and I love it. It's great, but again, when the rest of the field just has the same thing, you want to tweak it and just make it a little bit different. See what I have here? It's going to be very reminiscent of merthiolate, just a little bit brighter, a little bit more geared towards the orange itself. This is a killer. I like to fish translucent colors in everything but dirty mud, straight up chocolate milk water. Prototypically, I'll fish them on tea stained waters and clear waters as well. When I'm getting more into the clear water, I will try to stick more towards a natural color. I have green pumpkin laminated with like a translucent plain Jane cream color. And this actually glows. I use the glow pigment. And another good translucent color that works for me, your Chartreuse. Chartreuse is another great killer. Again, these are just colors that the waters that I'm describing just give them that like iridescent kind of glow that it's just so lively. And then when you combine that with the flicks and the shakes and the cadences and the pauses and the starts and the rips, you know, it's just no wonder why these things are fish catching machines. Then we'll go to the other side of the fence, your solid color. Not to say that these aren't bright, and not to say that some of these aren't natural. They're just solid. And these solid colors, I'm gonna fish more from your chocolate milk, ranging anywhere from in between, bordering on a little bit dirtier than clearer, but still in between anyway. Again, you've got my take on merthiolate, which is going to be your most popular color and your best bet if you're doing floating worm fishing. You're going to have your pinks, your bubblegum is another great color. It's a little bit more natural version of your pink. It's a little more subtle. Sometimes the more subtle colors will work over the loud colors. And again, it's all about separating yourself from the field per se. This pack, I tore through this. So this was homemade merthiolate pearl. Definitely got to make some more of that. White's a color that works pretty much anywhere. This I'll use on really overcast, cloudy days. To me, it just has a little bit more pop than your merthiolate or your pink or your chartreuse even. Color that I wish worked a little bit better here is your watermelon. It doesn't, but I try to use it anyway. So what I did was I gave it a little mix. Ended up mixing watermelon with motor oil, and what I ended up getting was like the chartreuse mustard colored, and it works great. This would be under the more natural end of the spectrum. Let's talk about what works best in what situations. So that's just a general size in terms of your average floating worm fishing will be like 5 or 6 inch worm again. But again, you know, as you get a little bit more experience floating worms, you're gonna find that you could open up the playbook to both ends of the spectrum. Your finessier approach and your more power, your more heavier set approach. So I showed you what I would prototypically throw on a medium spinning combo. Now let me show you how I would prototypically throw it on a medium bait casting combo. I'm gonna have your 12-pound braid, your 10-pound line this time, and I'm gonna use a bobber stop, leave a gap of about 3-4 inches, and then use beads in between chartreuse and red. On the bottom, I'm gonna have a split shot. Reason why I'm gonna use this is because I'm gonna want to use the medium bait caster and this setup here as my search bait. My search bait being a little bit submersed in the water. The split shot is gonna help it sink, and I'm gonna be able to cover water a little bit faster. I'm gonna use translucent bright color worm if I can. Here we have chartreuse translucent laminated with splotches merthiolate, and I have that on a 2/0 EWG fast grip hook. And this I would use in a little bit deeper waters, again as a search bait, trying to see what lives in the area, where they're living in that area, on the edges of pads, not necessarily ripping and burning, but at an intermediate pace. It's a little bit easier to throw a floating worm on a medium spinning rod as opposed to a medium bait casting rod. So that's why I reserve this as my search bait, because in terms of castability, that added weight just gives you a little bit more control when you're flicking it out there. I find that this works for me, and I find that this works best overall from one body of water to the next. Now, is that where floating worm fishing ends? Not at all. So if you wanted to go ahead and beef things up a little bit, you absolutely could do that. Here we're gonna have your medium heavy bait caster on a 7:2:1 gear ratio reel. Now this is the key difference. You're gonna use a Magnum finesse worm. I like to use the Zoom Houdini color. And another key difference is now we're gonna start getting into flipping hooks. You see what I got behind me? This would work great in here, amongst the reeds, in the weeds. This is now starting to get in the range of you could actually get back to this heavy cover to the junk and pull a fish out, especially when you're using 15-pound line. Now we're talking stronger line. You could definitely manipulate the fish a little bit more, and you have a little bit more wider range in terms of them getting in cover and you pulling them out. Just be sure to use a flipping hook. Again, this is going to be a 2/0 VMC flipping hook. Not heavy duty, but just a flipping hook, you know? We're not going into the heaviest cover possible. This works well around timber as well. And I would use it under a couple different situations. If you want to show a little bit bigger, bulkier offering. If you're just fishing somewhere where you're in the junk and this is what you got to do and you don't want to go down to lighter line, then this setup is going to be prototypical. Or if you're in a tournament situation and trying to upgrade or just show a different look than everybody else is showing, then this would be the one, especially, you know, with that bulb tail at the end. You could just cause so much commotion. So that would be my setup for medium heavy bait casting. Now remember, the key to success with the floating worm in terms of action is going to be leaving a kink in the worm. You're going to want to Texas rig the worm. You see that? How that's straight? That's not how you want to rig it. How you want to rig it is you put a J-bend in it, sink it right back down into the hook, but you're going to leave it weedless. So you don't let the hook come out. You just Texpose it or skin hook it. Leave it right there under the first layer of plastic. But when you touch with your finger, you sort of want to feel that tip. What that's going to allow you to do is fish it through cover, through pads, through weeds, through grass, through junk. You know, you're going to come up most of the time clean as a whistle. So that's medium heavy. Can you go heavier? Yes, you can. So here you're going to have a fast action, heavy action spinning rod, bait casting rod. And I have it on a fast gear ratio reel on a 9:3-to-1 Speed Demon by Cast King. And this is a little bit different. So that's rod and reel. In terms of line, I'm fishing that on 50-pound high visibility braid and braid only. So the style of fishing that you're doing here can be equivalent tossing a fraud in the thickest junk in the pads or punching. But what you're doing is you're fishing a little bit more weedless because you're tossing a worm in there. Same idea, same concept, but now what you're going to use is the 3. I like to use a 3/0. You could definitely go bigger. You could use 4/0, 5/0, even up to 6/0. But personally, I like 3/0. Heavy duty flipping. And again, I like to use VMC. This for me shines in the summertime when you're big worm fishing anyway. Is it the easiest to control in terms of action? No. But can it be done? Absolutely. And I personally like to use natural colors combined with your bright color. There's going to be a 12-inch man's jelly worm, spade tail, and that spade just gives it that extra vibration, that extra water movement. You want to slow down. You definitely can slow down on the edges of pads or in the pads, but I use a high speed reel for a reason, because once you make connection and you just have them locked down, you're gonna want to get them out. You don't want to give them any room whatsoever to go deeper into that stuff. I use 50-pound braid. You could use heavier. You could use 65. Really the same rules that apply to flipping and punching. Heavy duty flipping, heavy duty punching apply to this here in terms of line, in terms of rod, in terms of reel. You want to get in there, hook up with them, and get them out. So again, you know, the heavy setup will be great for summertime fishing. Don't be afraid to pull this out when the time is right. Oh, one last thing about that. So how I said we're using straight braid. One hack, and I suggest that if you're gonna try this, you do it as well. So there's an old Roland Martin trick. Shout out to Roland Martin, by the way, one of the GOATs. You take a old school Sharpie black magic marker, and the first 5, 6, 7 feet, usually the same length as the rod, you're gonna want to take that magic marker and blacken that, because you're using braid, and because this still at the end of the day is really like a finesse presentation. And just how you are basing your catch on sight, so are the fish in terms of their prey. And you don't want high visibility braid right in front of their face right when you're about to get a bite, and then at the last minute they bounce, they pull off. So cover yourself, cover your tracks, use black magic marker. So that's one end of the spectrum. Let's talk about the other end of the spectrum. You could definitely go lighter than medium rods. You could definitely go lighter than a medium spinning rod and medium bait casting rod when it comes to floating worms. You just have to know how to tinker and play with equipment to make sure you get the most out of it and when to use this in the right situations. So what I have here is an ultralight spinning combo. For the ultralights, I like to use shorter rods, 5.5 to 6 foot rods. There's actually going to be a 6 foot rod, and that's because I like to use this in tighter, closer quarter kind of situations. And what I'll use for this is going to be straight up like a 4.5 inch, 5-inch worm at most. I'm going to use light line. In terms of talking about finesse in pressured bodies of water, this would be my prototypical go-to setup where I'm not trying to reach into stuff. If I'm fishing the edge of pads, and again, it's a heavily pressured body of water and it's the time of year for floating worms, that's what I'm fishing, then I'm using this setup, which is going to be 6 foot ultralight on a 1000 size reel. You can use a 500 as well. 6-pound line to a size 1 hook. And this is going to throw you for a little bit of a curve, but I like to use a drop shot hook. Again, I like VMC. So something about just this finesse approach, you know, you're relying more on not really sticking a fish hard. This is more stuck the needle point in them, now you're reeling back in. You know, the needle point on a good drop shot hook is not really going to let a fish separate from your lure. Even if they jump up, you have them pinned really well and you keep them pinned, you're gonna get them to the boat. And I would suggest that you really try the lighter stuff as well. It's not just the mediums and exploring into the heavies. You know, this will get bites. This is good for numbers. Tournament situation when you're just starting out and you need to get a limit going, again, pressured bodies of water, this is the setup that I go to. And for you BFS guys, for you micro guys, I'm not going to leave you out either. There's definitely a setup for you in terms of floating worms applications as well. So here, for you crappie fishermen as well, panfish fishermen, even trout as well, multi-species. What you have here is a micro series rod. It's going to be a 4'6" ultralight. I have this on 4-pound test. Again, size 1 hook. For the finessier stuff, I like to rely more on that needle point rather than driving a hook through. And we're also talking the worm itself, it's small. We're talking super small, 3-4 inch worm. So these are Lucky Strikes, and I'll go to the Lucky Strikes, the trout worms, just because, you know, it fits the application and it works really well. Don't be afraid to try other stuff like Cream, for instance. They make the small finesse worms too. Sometimes you find them pre-rigged. Unrig them and just set them up for the application. And this, I would actually use this if I'm bank fishing as well. You know, close quarters, you don't really have a lot of room to cast out. Yeah, that's gonna pretty much cover it all for me in terms of floating worm fishing. This is a technique that, if I could describe it to you, it has the combined effect that big swim baits have in terms of the drawing power, that a shaky head would in terms of the numbers the fish are going to catch, or that a tube would for that matter as well. And again, you know, it's a bait that you can use a very wide span of the year, late winter, pretty much early winter. So like what, 3/4 of the year. You can use it in terms of applications as a finesse bait, like I just showed you, and as really like a power, like a search bait. And it's super deadly in the spring. Now is the time to fish it, guys, before the fish start really seeing it, getting pressured and getting wise to it, really, before you have to start jumping in your bag of tricks. And let me give you a little extra bonus, some hacks. A lot of people like to fish it with a barrel swivel. I don't, because I personally fish a lot of weedy waters, and to me the grass just gets caught up on the barrel swivel. Sometimes instead of using, if I want to fish it subsurface, you could throw nail weight instead of using the split shot. Smallest, lightest nail weight you could find. Or if you're fishing in a body of water that has current, go according to weight that's going to match that current. In terms of noise reproduction, that's a worm rattle in there. To be specific, one little hack I like to use, I'll use the Jethro Baits size small worm rattles, just to throw a little extra in there, give the fish a little bit of a different look that other people might be using. Told you about the magic marker. If you're using a natural color and you want to use that natural color but combine it with a real loud popping color and also throw a little bit of scent in the water, then your favorite attractant, I like to use Spike It Dip and Glow with the Chartreuse and garlic scent. That's pretty much gonna cover the whole gamut of floating worm fishing for me. Again, that's how I go about it. So that's gonna do it for today's video, guys. I hope that helps you out. Remember, everyone is different for their situation, their bodies of water, but this is really more of a general rule of thumb. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to try different colors out, to vary this technique up a little bit. It's one that's been around for a long time. It almost went away, and it's making a big resurgence now. If you're a finesse fisherman, then it's always been in your arsenal, and it's a deadly one. I will be leaving links down below in the description box, a couple of my favorite lures. Again, I make most of my lures for this technique, but I am gonna leave a description to Do It Molds and their website. That's the company that I use. I am very happy so far. I can't complain. They make solid items. Be sure to comment. Let me know what you think. Leave something in the comment box. Some maybe I left out. Any questions you might have. And get out there. It doesn't take much to get going with this. I just showed you a wide variety of different setups and presentations that you could throw on. It doesn't really matter what rod you have. The most important part, I would say, about floating worm fishing is going to be your bright colors, some naturals as well, and how you work the lure. Again, remember, leave that kink in that worm, because really that's what's going to help you out. Start with that medium rod and expand from there. So I hope that helps you out, guys. For now, I'm Miguel Malenciano. This is Evolution Angler Bassin, and I'll catch you next time.